Welcome to the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel, a channel that understands that sometimes it requires a mask and a hoodie to hide who you are on the internet. Like and subscribe for more videos. Hey guys, so I want to talk today about drivers and Fedora. So I've noticed that there's been a ton of comments in the actual Fedora video that I put out about driver support and usability and functionality and how to do things inside of the Fedora operating system versus how to do things in, say, a Debian-based operating system. I really want to point out the fact that 90% of you guys are right. I mean, it's just true. Debian is easier to manage and maintain. From a usability standpoint, it's way more familiar. A lot more people know Ubuntu than they do of like Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Fedora. And then, you know, the change in the command logic from yum to DNF is not ideal either. The fact that CentOS is dead, which was really a pretty substantially followed and supported operating system by a lot of companies, didn't really help Fedora that much. However, that said, Fedora is a good operating system. I do find it very usable, very friendly once you get used to it. But it does take a little bit more of a learning curve than, say, the Debian-based systems, because there's just a lot more supported on a Debian-based system. But popularity doesn't always make a system better. You got to keep in mind that the more popular systems become, the more likely they are to get infected with stuff, viruses, ransomware, having, problems with security. All those things become way more popular when the operating system is popular because there's more of a reason to do it, right? Criminals aren't going to spend a bunch of time developing ways to remote access systems and then only have maybe like 5 machines actually running that. Which is why operating systems like Nix, NIX, like if you haven't used that before, that's technically a newer flavor of a Linux system that is at the same level of Debian, Fedora, Arch, and BSD used to be. I mean, now there's Nix, which is up there too. That operating system is relatively new. There's really not that much support out there for it, but it is super fast, and it is designed to be user-friendly. The problem is when you start creating systems that don't use the norm command logic, it's not easier. It's a lot harder for most people to understand and get used to. And then there's really no reason to get used to it because Nix is kind of, it's a one-off. It's a project. Great, but there's really no following on it. So since there's no following on it, why spend all the time learning it? So I want to cover a couple things in this video. The first one was a comment that I had from an individual who asked how to install drivers for a Brother printer. I think we should tackle that first and show him how to install drivers for a Brother printer. Now keep in mind, that's not going to work here. I don't have a Brother printer, but I do want to show him how to do it. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to obviously do is go to the actual website that contains the drivers. So we can see that here. We have the Brother printer here, and we went to the support website, which was the third click down on the Google website. So once we go there, we could choose Linux and choose Linux RPM and click OK to download it. Now, if you had a Debian system, such as Mint or Ubuntu, you would choose the .deb format or Linux Deb. But because this is Fedora or Red Hat, we're going to choose RPM and we're going to choose OK. And we're going to get to the area here, which is going to ask us a bunch of questions, which we really don't need. For the sake of this, we just want to install the print driver. So we're going to grab the print driver, which is the RPM package. We're going to agree to the EULA and download it. Now, once you get to this site to download it, it's pretty straightforward, right? It tells you how to install the drivers right here. It tells you how to do the configuration right here. But you would have to get to the actual driver download site to do this. Unlike Windows, where it's probably plug and pray, this will more than likely just require you to install the drivers to see the printer. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to the actual downloads location and make sure you have the download. So if we click on this, we should be able to right-click the download and do Show in Folder, and show the actual download itself in the folder. And there it is. The next thing we're going to want to do is change the directory to where the actual downloads are. So you could do ls and hit enter, and that'll show you the names. Now keep in mind, Linux is case sensitive, right? So we're going to need to know specifically how it's spelled, because if it is an uppercase, you got to use an uppercase, and if it's a lowercase, you got to use a lowercase. So we want to change directory, but we want to go to download. So we're going to do cd space download. And you could hit the tab button on your keyboard to autofill the rest after you type in DOW for download. And then you're going to hit enter. Okay, so now at this point we are in the same place, right? So we want to do another ls to see what's in here. And we'll hit enter. And there we go. Now keep in mind, you could still do dir and hit enter, and it'll show you the same thing. The only difference is that the ls will color code things and dir won't. But dir for directory, which is something that you would find in a Windows system, will still populate the same data. So now what we need to do is if we follow the instructions here and we highlight this, that's the nice thing about Linux is we can copy and paste directly in here. So we can right click and choose paste. Now we know that what we also have to do is we have to add the package name after that. So if we grab the actual package name here and copy it, we'll have to paste it in here. But before we do anything, we're likely going to have to sudo this to get it to actually run. So if we do sudo space and then run the rest of the package and hit enter, we'll get prompted for a password. We'll put that in. And then we'll hit enter. And there you go. It'll install the package. Okay, so we have the package installed. And we can see that we have a depreciation that is in here, but don't worry about that. That doesn't matter much here for the sake of what we're doing. We installed the print driver. So now how do we find out whether or not the print drivers are installed? So if this is a web-based system, we can literally just highlight this and right-click and choose Open in New Tab. And once we do that, we'll see the actual printer idle status and the actual queue for the printer or the print drivers that are installed on our system. But if it's USB connected, we would actually have to go to the USB location, and then we would have to go to the model name of the printer. So we know that the printer model name is the MFC L2690DW. So we'd be able to do USB://brother and then put the actual device name after that and open it up that way through USB as well. I don't have any way to do that because unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know which one. I don't have this printer, so I don't have a way to pull this information. But this is a real simple way on how you can just install a print driver on a Linux Fedora system. Hopefully this helps the person that put the comment or the question as to how to install the Brother printer. Okay, so let's talk about drivers. So Fedora actually has an application or a product that you could install on the machine called RPM Fusion. This is kind of a standalone repository that you could add on to Fedora that's not installed out of the box, but it's necessary if you run an Nvidia graphics card. The reason why is because right now we're in the OpenGL format of the actual drivers, but if we want to install the actual Nvidia drivers, we can, as long as we install the RPM Fusion app package onto the actual Fedora 41 system. That opens up a door to a variety of packages, updates, and software that doesn't come out of the box in Fedora. Now, it does take quite a bit more drive space once you start really playing with it because you're going to download a lot more stuff onto your system. But with that said, you will get the actual official signed NVIDIA drivers available for your Fedora installation. Now, if you're running AMD, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The OpenGL works just as well as the AMD drivers, at least in my opinion, to run. But if you're interested in playing games for whatever reason on Fedora, and I say for whatever reason because while Fedora does support the later kernel revisions and the later updates for newer hardware, they don't have the same driver support package as, say, like Steam does for like the Steam Deck and all those other Steam-based systems. They're all Debian-based. So if you're interested in gaming, I would still run a Debian system. Even though you don't get the latest kernel revision, you will get the latest driver revision for your updated video card, which you could get direct from NVIDIA. Whereas if you go RPM Fusion, you do get the later drivers, but you're not going to get the full application support for playing games. Again, there are key differences between these operating systems. They're not 100% equal between each of them. Just from a command logic for updates, upgrades, and configuration, DNF versus apt is really just a 3-letter change in order to install the packages. Okay, so I've entered my command in order for me to install the RPM Fusion non-free version. So in other words, the supported version, the commercial version. And I want that because I want the commercial drivers for my NVIDIA card. Now, again, as with everything, all of this stuff will be in the wiki page that I have put together with the links as to where to grab this stuff as well as what these commands are in order to actually do this stuff. I'll even throw the stuff together in there for the person that had the Brother printer. I usually wouldn't do that because those are one-off things that I have no control over, but for the sake of NVIDIA, that's a different story. So let's run this to get this installed first. Okay, so next we have to run two commands. We're going to actually have to make a cache for the installation of our NVIDIA drivers. It's going to be necessary for us to do that. So we're going to do sudo dnf make cache. We'll hit enter. Okay, we've got the cache created. And then what we're going to do is we're going to enter in the sudo command for us to install the NVIDIA drivers. Okay, perfect. So now we have the text entered for our DNF to install our NVIDIA drivers. So let's hit enter on that. And we're going to load the repository. We're going to download a bunch of stuff. We're going to do an installation. Okay, there we go. We have the NVIDIA drivers now installed for our Fedora. Now keep in mind, this is a VM, so I don't know if this is going to bork after we reboot it. It's possible. But with that said, we do have them installed. Now there's a total of 144 updates that take place when you do this, which a lot of that is pretty substantial as far as space. So you're going to need probably close to 4 gigs of drive space in order to download it all and apply the update for your NVIDIA graphics card on Fedora. But again, those commands, I'll put them inside the Wiki location. You'll be able to run them. They'll install the NVIDIA drivers straight up. Personally, I still prefer the OpenGL drivers because I'm not going to use Fedora for gaming. But if you want to use Fedora for gaming, knock yourself out. You could use those NVIDIA drivers to do it. With that said, you will need RPM Fusion, and you will need the official repository, not the free version, in order to get the official drivers. Okay, so another one that comes up often is how to run VMs on Linux. Now, I will tell you that it is easier to do this on a Debian-based system than it is to do this on Fedora, only because with Fedora, the package installer doesn't work quite the same. It's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with it once it gets installed. It's just getting it installed and getting the drivers to function correctly that is not fun. Because you're not dealing with a full driver pack in Fedora that you will in, say, like a Mint or a Ubuntu system. So those two systems will actually give you a lot more driver compatibility than Fedora will. Fedora works a lot better for like a server. So if we were going to run this on like a Lenovo piece of hardware or a Dell piece of hardware, it might work totally fine. But I run customized hardware. And as a result, Fedora doesn't always work 100% of the time with VMware. Specifically VmWare Workstation as like a virtualized platform to run a desktop. Your results may vary. That's all I'll say. You could give it a shot. It may work. It may not. Now, I will tell you that on this particular system, I do have Secure Boot enabled, which means that I had to create a signed certificate or a self-signed certificate in order for me to get the application to work correctly. Now, since I'm going to set this up in a VM, I'm not actually sure how this will work out, since we're technically going to then look at a VM running in a VM. So I don't know if this will work or not, but I'm going to run through the commands on how to do it. You could follow along at home. You should be able to install it. Whether or not it will work on my VM, I don't really know. We'll find that out together, because that would be interesting, right? Create a VM inside of a VM inside of a VM. How many levels deep could you actually go? Might have to try that. Probably not. But we could dive into this and take a look and see if this will work, at least in our VM platform. It should work for your home platform, but again, I don't have a way to show that here because I'm not going to do that through my local desktop. So bear with me for a second here. Let's get this staged up. Let's start jumping into it. And let's take a look if we could get our VM set up and configured. Okay, so what I did is I copied the data over, and if we go to the file location here and go to downloads, we have the VM Workstation bundle. Now, if you don't know how to get this far to get to that bundle, you'll have to go to VMware's site, which is Broadcom's site at this point, and you'll have to sign up for a free account. And then you should be able to use this as a personal use application. This is not designed to be used as a business. This is specifically used for personal use. And if you're using it at home in order to run your Windows-based desktop on your actual Linux system that you need for one or two applications, this is how you would do it. Okay, so we're going to start in the downloads directory, and you're going to see that I've already CD'd or changed directory to the downloads location in the actual command prompt. Now at this point, we have to do something called change mod, which is, we're going to change or modify, it's chmod, which is really technically change mod, but it's really modify, but whatever. We're going to modify the actual installation package to run as an installation package. Now you could do that two ways. The one way is you could do it through the command line with the command, which is what I'm going to do in this video, but I'm going to show you how to do it in the GUI too, which is just to right-click on the actual file, go to Properties, and then go execute this as a program. We want to make sure that that's checked. If it's not checked, it won't run it as a program. It's basically like in a Windows environment, if you have an exe file, and you remove the .exe extension from the end of it, it would obviously not run as an exe file. In Linux, it's similar. The only difference is they give you a slide button that says run it as an executable, don't run it as an executable. So in this case, we're going to run it as an executable, but I'm going to show you how to do the same thing that we just did through the GUI in the command line. Okay, so basically what we're going to do here now is we just want to type in our chmod a+x and then the actual name of the package. Now I'm sorry if this bounces around a little bit. I'm kind of periodically going back and forth into this and out of the system. So once we go in here and we actually run this command, what this is going to do is this is going to set that bundle permissions to be allowed to be executed. So access and execute, or AX, right? So let's get that run. So we have that run. So now let's move forward and let's actually execute the bundle as an installable application. So to do that, it's really simple. We're just going to type in sudo. We're going to do a space and then a ./ and then the name of the bundle. Now you don't have to type the whole thing out, right? You could just type in VM capitalized and then W lowercase, which is how the packages come, or you can rename it to something else like bob.bundle. It doesn't make any difference. And then once you execute it, you're just going to do sudo space ./ and then whatever the name of the actual bundle is, and then you just hit enter. You got to put a password in. Be a miracle if I type that correctly. So there you go. That installed successful. However, we're not done yet. We've just installed the bundle. What we have to do next is we're going to actually have to install the kernel development. So there's a kernel modification that we're going to need to install in order for this to run correctly on Fedora. So to do that, we're going to do sudo dnf install kernel-devel space -y for yes, so we don't get prompted, and we're going to hit enter. There you go. Already installed, nothing to do. Great. So let's move on to the next step. So the next step is going to be to install the VmWare mod configurations. So let's get those, or modular configurations, let's get those installed next so we could move forward on the installation of VMware. Okay, so the mod config, basically what that does is it modifies the kernel value inside of the actual system to allow us to create a configuration for VMware in it. And what that'll allow us now to do is once it loads, it'll become a system value or a system option for VMware, specifically Workstation. Again, I'm not 100% sure that this is going to work on a VM, but we're going to try it anyway. So the command on this is simple. It's just sudo VmWare mod config. Then it's a space, and we're going to do -- console, another space, -- install, and then another dash and all. And then you'll hit enter, and that'll do the mod config. Okay, so at this point, if you're on a physical machine, you're going to need another step. And another step is going to be to create an open SSL cert in order to create something called an NVidea DER, which is a basically a certificate that's required to run VMware, which may or may not cause issues with the drivers. It has caused issues with mine, where I've had problems where after installing it, my network adapter doesn't work correctly anymore, or I get it installed and I get problems with my Nvidia card, which is why if you're going to run VMware, I'm going to tell you right now, do not follow the previous portion of this video and install the NVidea drivers, because that causes a conflict and then it doesn't work right. Now you can do it on Debian, it works fine, but in the latest version of Fedora, for whatever reason, once you install those NVidea drivers, it will cause some problems with VMware. So OpenGL drivers are totally fine, they work, and you won't have to deal with this. Now, as a VM inside of a VM, I don't know if that's going to be the same issue, but I just want to give you a warning because I run it on physical hardware, and on physical hardware with an NVIDIA video card, use the OpenGL driver if you plan on using VMware. Okay, so since we don't have a certificate installed, the question is does this now work, since we are technically a VM inside of a VM? So there's VM Workstation. What do you think? Will it work? We'll have to accept the terms and next. License agreement and next. And you probably want to leave that selected as to check for product updates, just because if you're going to continue to update the actual OS, you want to update the actual packages that go along with it. So I just leave that as yes. No, I don't want to join the customer participation. I want to use it for personal use, and then we'll have to put in a password. Okay, so that was interesting because we're technically a image inside of an image inside of an image. That didn't work very well. So it kept taking my keyboard or my mouse interface away from where I was actually focused, because now there's another session of the same thing running in the background. So obviously don't do this. If you're going to do it on bare metal. Don't do this on a VM. But with that said, I'm going to skip, or actually I'm just going to choose to remind me later. We could update this at a later point. I'm just curious at this point, will it work? So we have a test system built here, or we have a system now with VmWare Workstation built. And if we go into my computer and I choose new virtual machine, does it give me the ability? It sure does. So it does appear to work fine inside of VmWare, which is really bizarre. But that's basically the command logic to get you installed. I'll put the additional commands inside of the wiki on how to do the install of the OpenSSL. Now, if you don't run secure boot, like if you have secure boot turned off on your actual physical hardware, you may not need that. I would give it a test first. You don't want to run the OpenSSL cert if you don't have to. If it works fine, then great. But I will tell you that if it doesn't work, you'll know right away. It'll tell you that it can't mount the image, or you don't have access to the hard drive to run the VM during the installation process. And if that turns out to be the case, just jump back over to the wiki, grab that information, run those things line for line, and then reboot the system. Now on reboot, when the system's coming back up, you're going to get an area of the screen. I don't know that I'll be able to take a print screen of it. I'll try, but we'll see what will happen. You'll get an area of the screen that tells you you're going to have to modify the system boot value and add the key. Now, when you add the key, you're going to have to use the exact same password you password protected the key with in the first place. If not, you'll cause issues on your reboot. You'll have to go in there and modify the key again to use the password to re-encrypt or encrypt the system. Once that key is entered and you reboot the system, you'll never be prompted for it again. However, if your hard drive, or not your hard drive, but if your motherboard fails or something else goes bad, you're going to have to decrypt the system using that same password, so make sure you keep that handy somewhere. Works a lot like, say, BitLocker does on Windows. Now, if you're running NVIDIA and you have problems with the NIC, I'll also put that in the wiki, the 2 commands you got to run to try to recover the network adapter drivers. Again, I ran into this whole slew of fun, enough to know that on an NVIDIA, on this particular machine, an RTX 3060, don't install the NVIDIA drivers on Fedora if you're going to run VmWare. Just trust me, it doesn't work. Now, oddly enough, it works fine in the VM, but on physical hardware, it didn't work. So I'm assuming that it's not using those drivers even though they're installed. It's not finding them as being the drivers that it should use, because it sees that it is in, probably some kind of generic or default card through VmWare. But that's just something to keep in mind when you're going through this process. Okay, guys, so I'm going to end this short video here. I don't know how short it actually is, but I'm going to end this video here. If you guys have any other questions about Fedora or Debian-based products, let me know. I'll throw something together for you. I'm going to continue to do some Windows videos here in the future, too. I'd like to review the Server 2025 configurations because they have substantially changed between 2019 and 2025. Now, I use 2022 as a skip over, just like I would use 2016 as a skip over OS, at least from a server perspective. Those are really like early adopters, generally speaking. Those operating systems are not usually as good or as well created as the secondary releases of them. And that pretty much goes for everything Microsoft does. So I don't spend too much time reviewing the in-between OSs. And that's going to be, 2008, 2012, 2016, and then 2022. Same thing on our desktop side. Those are the early release versions of the Windows operating systems, which are usually terrible. So usually try to avoid those as well. Microsoft's got a little better at the naming convention to hide them, but ironically or oddly enough, they really haven't fixed the main core issue, which is the terribly developed operating systems being released way too early. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope that this was helpful for somebody. Again, all the info will be in the wiki. Appreciate it. If you don't know how to get there, sure somebody will tell you how to get there, but it's just in the About section. Hit there, and then you'll see the Git repository. Go there, and you'll see the wiki at the top. Click that. On the right-hand side is a column of different things that are associated to videos, and you can click through them and grab all the information you want. All right, guys. Take care.